helps that you're in the office.
But
when
you didn't get it, because it starts on, I thought, next Wednesday. for
it started
Chicago.
2 weeks ago.
Did it? I was there 2 weeks ago, and I thought they were still just doing first responders.
No, we started doing 2 weeks ago.
Did they?
But you don't qualify anyway.
Me? Oh, I'm not even calling.
You're just a kid.
I know exactly how I'm going to get mine, and it's going to be in order.
I was surprised.
So who do we got on the phone?
You guys aren't done. Our military isn't done.
Wayne Tillman from
We
Grace.
are. I mean, we're somewhere in there, but
Yeah.
not
Was that-
this early.
Wayne
Not-
from
not
Grace.
yet.
I mean,
Okay.
especially when you look at the population and risk.
Yeah.
The risk is very low.
Oh, yeah, especially for your age group.
And most people are in relatively good health as compared to the rest of the population.
Yeah.
Also, the mitigating factors, like when they say you put on a mask, you have to wear a mask.
Yeah.
So I looked up the largest land mass cities in the United States.
Yeah.
Alaska has the top 4.
That would
Okay,
make
you
sense.
guys ready?
Yeah.
We're doing a roll call.
Yeah. Population.
Call the February 4th, the snowy February 4th Plan Commission meeting order. Mr. Martinez, please call the roll.
Mayor Olson,
I'm here.
Commissioner Hogan is excused. Commissioner Bothart,
Here.
Commissioner Haley, Commissioner Haley,
Well, that's him right there, I think.
Yeah.
That you, Kevin?
Kevin Haley here.
There you go, just in time.
City Engineer Morrow,
Here.
Alderman Dendria,
Here.
Commissioner Leon.
Here.
We have a quorum, please rise and pledge allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. First item is approval of the regular meeting minutes of January 7th. Any additions or corrections?
Motion to approve.
Second.
Discussion, seeing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed?
Aye.
Motion carries. Thank you, Kevin. I'm going to jump out of order and go to item D3. This is a Holterman condominium project. It is a declaration and a declaration of plan. I'll wait for Mr. Martinez to catch up to us.
Okay.
Mr. Martinez, whenever you're ready.
Yep.
I'm not hurrying you.
Okay, so this is a condominium plat application to create a new condominium. However, the two-family structure, two-family residence is already existing, so it's only for the change of the ownership. All the common elements, driveway already existed. This resident received occupancy in 2004. It's a permitted use in the two-family residence district. The existing structure is conforming, complies to all the setbacks. So, yeah, basically it's the change of the type of ownership to a new condominium. So staff recommending approval. Just let me know if you have any questions.
Questions from the commission?
No.
Commissioner Haley, any questions?
No.
Is there a motion to recommend approval of a resolution conditionally approving a condominium plat for 7930 and 7932 South 68th Street, a condominium development at that address?
So moved.
Second.
Discussion of the motion. Seeing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed?
Aye.
Motion carries. Yeah, it's just fun. Happy to do it. Let's back up to item D1, a site plan application for the city of Franklin for a municipal sanitary sewer lift station. Mr. Martinez.
Yes, so this is a city application for a new site plan to allow for a replacement lift station. So in the picture, you can see the existing lift station that needs replacement. So the new lift station will be located about 150 feet from the existing lift station. The existing lift station is a below grade lift station. The new one will be a above grade lift station. Will include a driveway, the lift station building, right here, and the wet well. Also, we'll have landscape screening between the street and the building. All the landscaping will not interfere with the sanitary sewer or the force main. And this is the elevations of the lift station building. It's worth noting that the consultant has addressed the staff comments about the exterior materials and the roof type. They changed the roof type from a flat roof to a hip roof, you can see, and they have provided the samples of the exterior materials. The Economic Development Commission recommended approval of this application last week, and staff is also recommending approval.
For Mr. Haneke and the Alderman, is this on 60th Street in the industrial park? Okay. Okay, so you'll appreciate that the sewer to water department upgraded to brick and a pitched roof. Not a public meeting point. But if you say it real quick, I won't.
Can we maybe recommend break protocol and allow for
Is
comments?
there a
from
motion
public?
to suspend the order of business?
So moved.
Second.
This is to allow Mr. Haneke to speak. All those in favor?
Aye.
Any
Aye.
opposed? Motion carries. Mr. Haneke, please. But since you're going to ask, we got to put it on the record.
Got to do name and address, right?
Because the Holterman homestead has 12 and a half acres. Will this lift station service those acres to the west? Deep enough, big enough for them necessarily to develop the other 8 acres and have some more development on Oakwood Road in order to use this lift station, get the effluent out.
You're south, though. This is at the end of Franklin Drive, essentially. It's right where the fire station is.
It's not the one that's right on 60th and Oakwood.
No,
I'm sorry. I apologize.
it's okay.
It's between Franklin Drive and Oakwood.
So that, it doesn't matter. I'm sorry.
It's okay. It's fine. Is there a motion to return to regular order?
So
Good night,
moved.
Alderman.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed?
Aye.
Motion carries. Kevin, unless you say nay, I'm going to count you as a aye every time you say aye.
I like that approach.
Okay. Mr. Martinez, anything else?
No. Well, parking striping is not required for this type of use. They have the city have to obtain a wetland exception letter from the DNR. Yeah. Unless you have any question. Oh, I have another comment that the city will create a new lot for this lift station. It's not part of this application, but so you will see in the future an application for a certified survey map to create a new lot for the lift station. The minimum area in this planned development district is 1 acre, so this lot will be about half acre. So a land division variance will be required at that time to create the new lot.
Questions from the commission?
Kevin Haley.
Mr. Haley, Commissioner Haley.
Just one question. Previously, when we deliberated the Waukesha Water Utilities return line through here, I asked some questions and we had discussion that as part of that work, they were going to be converting a lift station in the business park to a gravity sewer. Is this in fact the same one? If so, why are we replacing it? Or can somebody shed some light on that for me?
Mr. City Engineer.
Okay, I'll answer that. So you're right, Mr. Commissioner, this was planned to be abandoned with the Waukesha project. The low bidder with Waukesha had an estimated price for our project of $13 million. Our budget was about $4 million. So we worked with the contractor and we could not come to a resolution to get our project in that. So we're going to pull our project from the Waukesha project, and we're converting our temporary lift station to a permanent lift station because it's essentially going to be there forever now.
I appreciate and understand that. I see what you're doing with the project. I just wanted to figure out if we were still going to go after the gravity sewer. So it's price prohibitive, and I understand. I hope they'll somehow compensate us in another manner. I'm fine with it. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner. Anyone else? Is there a motion to approve a resolution approving a site plan for construction of a new lift station to replace existing municipal sanitary lift station in the city of Franklin Industrial Park at approximately 5801 West Franklin Drive?
So moved.
Second.
Discussion on the motion. Hearing none. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. Thanks, guys. Move on to item D2, which is a miscellaneous and affidavit of correction for a fire circle in Ryanwood Manor. Mr. Martinez.
Right, yes. So this is located in the Ryanwood Manor subdivision, outlet number 1. So the fire pit that you see in the picture was installed without obtaining first city approval. The recorded plat has a restriction that any structures in the outlet it's prohibited unless city approval is obtained. So that's why the applicant is requesting the after-the-fact permission to have the fire pit in this outlet, and also it will relocate the fire pit from this location to this location about 15 feet, because where the fire pit is located now is too close to the storm sewer utilities. That's, you can see up the black line. So this application is to allow for the fire pit and also to modify the stormwater drainage easement, because currently the drainage easement will cover the entire outlet 1. So the storm drainage easement will be reduced to a 20-foot street along the storm sewer. And the relocated fire pit will be outside the easement. So that's why this application also includes the affidavit of correction to make that note into the recorded plat.
Questions from the commission? Did they build it already? That's what that is?
Needs to be relocated.
It's been relocated?
It needs to be.
Oh,
It's up already.
Are they relocated?
Yeah, that picture is April 2020.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
The new-
so that's where it belongs.
No.
Not
It
what-
needs to be relocated.
Yeah, has not been relocated yet.
I'm waiting for that phone.
Yeah.
Okay. Mark last, but he doesn't get them. Okay. Is there a motion to recommend approval of resolution authorizing the installation of a community fire pit with surrounding stone circle and an affidavit of correction to reduce the stormwater drainage easement number 1 within Outlet 1 of Ryanwood Manor subdivision located approximately 10116 South Creekview Court?
So moved.
Second.
Okay. Any comments on the motion? Hearing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. Okay, let's go to the fun one. Going to item D4, Unified Development Ordinance Update Revision Project. I think most of you know that I've never been a fan of the UDO, even though in 1998, I made the motion to approve. And people ask me often, do you regret any of the motions that you've ever made? And I said, only one. And this was it. So Heath and I have been talking about this, and Heath has been talking to staff, and he comes before us with the starting document. Just find out where the commission wants to go with it. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Heath.
Good evening. Can you hear me?
Yep.
Okay, good. In your packet, I provided a memo, which is probably ridiculously long, providing you some understanding as to where we are and what staff's point of view is on this project. The objective ultimately is to prepare a request for proposal to either submit for help, assistance of a sort, but we want to figure out first off how far we're going to go, what that's going to ultimately look like, so that we can frame the RFP appropriately. Primarily, the first piece of decision making comes down to a set of potential options for how to proceed. The first one would be whether or not we should just adjust and or modernize the existing UDO versus the second option, which would be a full comprehensive redesign rewrite, including uses, districts, and mapping. Or the third option, which is let's just start over, write another ordinance entirely and just replace the current one with something essentially different. Staff was operating on the idea that maybe this is probably going to be some combination of options 1 and 2, or option or 1 or 2, because full rewrites may or may not include the districts or setback requirements or infrastructure requirements and so on. But we wanted to give some staff's input as to what this ultimately would look like. 6 years ago, my predecessor went to the council on 3 occasions in December of 2014 and then February and April 2015 to talk about a series of comprehensive edits to the UDO, which included a top 20 list. Staff's actual list was more like about 30, but they stopped it at about 20. And at the risk of repeating ourselves, I included that list of 20 in the back of this memo. But I wanted to do this as well as provide sort of a set of general comments about staff's point of view on the UDO, as well as some specific issues with it. First off, under general comments.
Heath?
Yeah.
Your volume is a little low. You were doing great, and then you faded out. Did you change some position you're in?
No, but I can. How's that? Is that
It's
better?
all right. Okay, sorry.
Okay. I'll speak up. The first general comment we have is that the UDO is over integrated. The UDO is essentially a combination of zoning and subdivision regulations. And when it was originally created, it was created in such a way that you're combining things in such a way that in order to come up with a coherent whole, you end up making either a whole series of caveats or exceptions, or you end up creating a common language which really doesn't fit either. One example I mentioned is the natural resource protection standards, along with evaluations and requests for modifications, the so-called land division variances, which technically isn't a variance because those are adjudicated strictly by the Board of Zoning and Building Appeals, but this one isn't. So those are the kinds of things that end up happening when it's over integrated. A second comment is that there's a lot of outdated approaches. The approach that was taken with this ordinance is essentially falling back on some of the standards of old zoning ordinances, and it ends up relying an awful lot on things like special uses and planned development districts. Well, one, the state has changed the way special uses are supposed to be handled at the local level, and 2, planned development districts, when you create one, you're essentially creating another whole zoning ordinance or another whole zoning district on top of what you already have. So functionally speaking, you've got well over 70 zoning districts if you account for every planned district. it would be preferable to have something that's a little less cumbersome, just for ease of implementation by staff, as well as the general public being able to understand what's going on. 3, the ordinance has a lack of clarity, and in my example, I cite section 15.3.0501C, which is a section called the exclusions from the Natural Resources Protection Plan. If you actually went to that section of the ordinance, that particular paragraph is over a page long. And it should have been broken up into sections with exceptions, and it didn't happen, so it all ended up as one paragraph. It's just excessively wordy, and verbiage in an ordinance is not a good thing if it gets carried away. There's also a lack of triggers. Staff is often trying to track down to make sure that site plan conditions are implemented, that all the site plan requirements are implemented, and there's not really an effective method for implementing a site plan once it's approved, or any kind of development once it's approved. There's some elements of that that are well done, particularly from the engineering public works side, but it's not consistent or coherent from the planning side, so that needs to be addressed. Finally, no graphics. There's very, very little graphical inclusion in the UDO. A lot of this stuff can be better presented visually than it can be in words. So the more you do graphics, the better off you are. Now, we'll get down to the specific issues, because there are specific things that we can address. One, an update of the definitions. That's pretty standard. I don't see too many problems with the definitions, although there are some inconsistencies between the uses that are defined there and what's currently listed on the tables, which brings me to number 2, which is the table of permitted and special uses in residential, non-residential districts. In the first place, there's 2 of them. There's not one. All your uses technically should be listed in one chart. Secondly, the non-residential district chart is 37 pages long. And there are over 200 uses in there that are not actually assigned to any particular district, which from my perception could create a potential problem if anybody actually came in and addressed that or tried to challenge it. The SIC manual is simply, the code that is implemented there is simply not intended for local land use. It's, I think, overly specific. And the way we have it implemented, it's inconsistent. If you have any questions about that, I can come up with a specific example to address that. I'm going to go ahead and head off to zoning districts, because there are a multitude of ones that I addressed here. We have 37 districts, 28 districts, base districts, 9 overlays, and that doesn't include the planned development districts. There are several issues with these, and I addressed some of them. Regulo, if you could show the first slide. The first comment I have is about the OL1, OL2 districts. That's not it. Can you go one back? Yeah. Or do you want me to share screen? Huh? You want me to share screen?
Yes.
All right. Hang on. Okay. You should see on your screen the OL1 district, Office Overlay District. That is the entirety of the OL1 district. I wrote in my write-up that it's sort of akin to the B6 district, but that's not quite true. It's sort of like a steroids-induced version of some combination of B6 and the Business Park District. By the way, the Business Park District is that one lot right there. That's all of it. That's the Northwestern Mutual property. And then the property right behind it is generally vacant properties with a few smattering of residential properties. I don't know. I think my concern with this particular district is, in particular, is that the BP district allows for a building height of up to 5 stories. The OL1 has no height limit, which could be a problem for fire protection, among other things. But I'm not entirely sure why it exists or why we don't simply have these properties behind it zoned to business park or some other appropriate standard. The bigger one, I think, this is the fun one. This is the OL2 district, almost all of it. It actually goes a little bit further to the west. This is the Sendix property at the corner of Rawson and 51st, along with the CVS, and then there's a bank. The general business overlay district basically imitates the B2 district. So you have a choice. Basically what it creates is it creates 2 different zoning districts for one property. You can either implement M1 or you can implement the OL2 district on these properties, which I suppose is more flexible, but then it begs the question, okay, so if they implement it, though, why don't we just have them zoned to B2? You'll also notice over here, you have a B2 district, 2 properties that are zoned B2 with the OL2 overlay, which is essentially the B2 district. So you have 2 of them zoned, you got an overlay on top of the existing district. So it's the same thing. I don't know why that was done, but it was done that way. They aren't implemented very well. It's not easy to implement them. They don't normally come off very well. So I just thought I'd throw that in there. The next one coming up is this one. This is the R1E district. I love the title of this one. The Countryside Estate Single Family Multiple Residences on a Single Lot. That's the name of it. Somewhere along the line, somebody got approval for a property, a 12-acre property. This is roughly 12 acres, to be able to put a second single-family dwelling on this lot. That's kind of a problem, not because I'm not in favor of it, but because it's the only one. Somebody essentially carved out an exception for a single property owner that is not accorded to anybody else in a single-family district. Like I say, I don't have a problem with that, but if we're going to do that, then it should be somewhere else in addition to just this lot.
Keith, let me interrupt
Yeah.
for 1 second. Let the record reflect that the city engineer has left the meeting
Okay.
at 7:27.
Okay.
Thanks.
The next thing is single-family districts. We have 7 of them, not including this one. You probably don't need that many. The difference between several of the districts is only a matter of a lot size. They literally repeat the rest of the same kinds of standards except for the lot size. There's really no reason to have that many districts, that many types of things. It's really unnecessary, and it creates a level of inflexibility that I don't think was intended, or maybe shouldn't be intended. It's more flexible to create more flexible options, or at least a different kind of flexible option. As I mentioned before, you have 37 zoning districts. Your neighbor to the east, our neighbor to the east, Oak Creek, is 19. Greenfield has 23, which includes 6 overlays. West Ellis is 18. These are cities of relatively similar size that don't have nearly as many districts as we do. I should also say I did look up the city of Muskego. They actually have more districts, and that they have the same, I think they have the same kind of problem that we do. They have more base districts, they have more planned development districts approved, and that can be that creates administrative difficulties for staff, among other things. It's just easier just to simplify if you can. There are also rarely used districts. I mentioned the Business Park District, which is 1 parcel. The RC1 district is still in the ordinance. It's the Conservation Residence District, but that one no longer exists either. That is now PDD 39. There are districts that are hardly ever used. There's also the L1 landfill district, which is in the text but isn't mapped. The waste management landfill is actually zoned M2. And then you have the reverse problem, which is map districts that don't have any text. The big one is C1, Conservancy. There's over 700 parcels that have C1 zoning on them, but there's no text anymore. I want to bring this one up. for reference. See there, that's the M3 quarry district. That hasn't been in the ordinance for over 23 years. But apparently when the legal description was created for the PDD 2324, which is just south of there for Payne and Dolan and then Vulcan, it didn't come out right, so you've still got this little strip of M3. There's also some district referenced in the zoning map legend for I-1, which I don't even know what that is, but it's still listed in the legend. So obviously we've got some issues to clean up there. The next one is the South 27th Street Corridor Plan, which has been implemented with 3 different districts. One is the B4 district, another is the B7 district, and the third is the South 27th Street Corridor Design Overlay. The B7 district actually there's only one location for that, and that's the Ascension Hospital property. There aren't any other B7 anywhere. B4 is sort of like a strip of property along 27th Street. Although I was looking around, there's actually is roughly a 1 acre property over on Loomis Road that's zone B4. I don't know how that happened either. But it exists. It would be easier and cleaner just to simply implement the corridor plan with a single district and then follow up with use districts that are appropriate for the location. Speaking of non-residential districts, typically they're organized in such a way that you proceed from less intense to more intense. And our districts don't really do that. They keep bouncing back and forth. The B2 district is more like is called general business. So theoretically that should be a catch-all everything district. And then it's in between neighborhood and community, which are small to medium scale. Then you have the B4, which is more tailored to, it's a more tailored district, but it also is a mixed use type of operation. Then you have B5, which is basically supposed to be, in my interpretation, more large scale type operations. Yet there are only 4 properties in the entire city that are zoned that way. One is owned by a Boys International group, and then 3 lots. These are all on Highway 100. The other one is the other 3 lots are 2 owned by a self-storage and then a motel up north of Rawson. It's almost non-existent. The B6 district, likewise, there's about 7 properties that are zone B6. 6 of them are right along Loomis. They're professional office, but they're sort of like commercial office and banks, which theoretically could go in any other district other than B6. Then the B7, as I mentioned, the CC district, which is technically, when you really think about it, just another PDD district. The M1 district, which is generally intended to be for operations of any scale or size, but primarily the difference between M1 and M2 is where they do the primary operation. In my experience, limited industrial is usually done inside a building, and the M2 generally includes stuff that's sometimes done outside, or often is. And then the business park, which is sort of intended to be like an office professional use location, although in our case, it's one property. Finally, we have multiple office districts. We got 3 of them. That might be a few too many. That's something to consider. There's also things that we have to change, legally required changes. Act 267 of Act, let me say that again. Act 67 of 2017, which created specific criteria for special uses. That needs to be incorporated. Any changes to floodplain regulations, we have some issues involving our wetland standards that have to be incorporated. There's things that have to be done anyway that we should be doing. And I also mentioned natural resource protection standards. As I mentioned earlier, those are spread out all over the place. It's really hard to track down. We have Part 4 where the protection standards actually are located, but then you have Part 3 where the intensity and capacity calculations, which reference those standards, are incorporated, yet that comes first in the order of things. And then the standards of the natural resource special exception are in Part 8 under the BZBA. Obviously, we need to update those. The wetlands, again, as I mentioned, has to be updated. And that has to come too. Next, we have the open space development option. You have way too many of these. R1, there's 3 different options depending on how much open space you want. Most of the districts, residential districts, have at least 2. You really don't need that many. Settling on 1 would be plenty. And if you wanted to see them happen, it's a lot easier to make them happen if you give people incentive to do it. Because a lot of these open space options actually lower the effective density, or lower their density, what they can actually get. So you'd actually be reducing lots while trying to increase open space, which is sort of the opposite of what you're trying to do. You want to create an incentive to make it happen. Or you make it the required option, and then the standard cookie cutter design would be special use instead. There are parking standard problems, primarily because our off-street standards don't match our table of uses. So oftentimes when we create a set of standards, we have to sort of interpret what the use is relative to what we have available. Some of the standards are way too high, in my opinion. Although with the amount of snow, that might lead to the need for the extra parking. One area where we don't have anything is bicycle parking. Staff runs on the notion that we generally suggest 1 bicycle parking space for every 10 auto spaces. But we don't have any standards for location and other things that are actually codified, so it would be good to have that codified. Finally, process post-approval is, as I've mentioned before, truly inconsistent. It would behoove us to have a standard rational approach that runs across regardless of the types of operations, whether they're site plans or subdivisions, to make sure that it's implemented completely. Some of the other things I thought we could potentially include are things like low impact development standards. Right now we look at sort of development as sort of a series of things. There's series pods. You've got stormwater pods over here. You got the traffic circulation parking pods over here. You got landscaping over here. You got building design. They're all sort of like these separate elements that sort of end up on a site plan. It would be better if we had a more integrated whole, so that the stormwater and the landscaping in particular are sort of treated like a coherent whole. So we're not parking, as we had recently in an implementation issue on a development where people were parking. There was an attempt to try and plant landscaping trees in what amounted to a bioswale, which was not a good idea. But that's because one side is being reviewed by one group, and one other standard is being reviewed by somebody else, and so there's not a coherence to it. A low impact development type approach or something like it would allow you to be able to create a coherent whole on each site, and that would also integrate with the natural resource standards. So rather than simply trying to mitigate them or deal with them, you treat them like they're a part of the whole design. I also mentioned wind and solar power facilities. These are the trend. Wind power is a little bit more problematic because they tend to be very large. There's a lot of them north of here, northwest of here, that are, they're very large, and there are a lot of them. They need siting issues, probably. Obviously, you want to make sure you're not in a flight path, and I'm not just talking planes, I'm also talking birds, because they don't necessarily see them when they're flying. And they also they sometimes make a background buzzing noise, which sometimes drives people crazy, and I don't know how that is, but it sometimes happens. Solar power we could encourage as much as possible, because they're relatively easy to build, and they're quiet, and they're just there. We also have a discussion about affordable housing. One of the ways that you can provide affordable housing is not with large-scale housing complexes, but with simple additions like allowing for accessory dwellings attached to existing dwellings. That way you can create a sort of a pseudo duplex without necessarily changing the footprint of the property. There are ways that these things can be designed so that they don't actually appear, they don't actually look like this. And then at the end there, I included the previous top 20 list, and some of them are repeats, like the table of uses, and there's other things there like it's administrative flexibility. He does mention the conservation subdivision design. That's the open space options. There's other things in here that need to be adjusted. One that came up recently was engineering is required to file any changes to the impervious coverage of the city. And we don't actually regulate the impervious coverage in the UDL. We regulate lot coverage, which is just the buildings on the lot. And so there's a discussion about how do we combine those things so that we're addressing the impervious coverage because it's required. It's not necessarily that we're looking to have to do that. It's required by MMSD and then the DNR and on up. It's all part of a stream of things that are required. So trying to address those as well is something that we have to consider. I don't really have anything else to address, so I guess I'll open it up for questions or comments.
Thanks, Heath. Couple of the issues that you and I talked about relative to simple things like parking regulations. I've always believed that we ought to dictate maximums, not minimums. If somebody wants to have less parking and it suits their business need, why are we telling them that they need so many thousand more spaces than they really need? That just seems to be bad land use and bad for the environment.
Yes.
I've also had issue with some of our requirements for site plan review. When the apartments over here on Highway 100 in Drexel, you don't know about this. This is before your time. They wanted to replace the columns for their balconies. They needed a site plan amendment. Why? Made no sense to me. You're not changing the footprint of the building. You're not changing the look of the building, but they needed a site plan review and approval. It's just silly stuff like that makes us look bad. But anyway, my bigger question, Heath and the city attorney, let's say we go forth and rewrite this, do something to it, and the zoning designations change. Instead of B7 on Ascension's property, that now becomes B12, whatever. We're now going to have to rezone the entire city, right? Public hearings and the whole 9 yards. Okay. All right. I don't have an issue with that. It's just, you just got to know that.
That's why the C1 district remained on the map, because planning staff was concerned about the numbers of not simple, easy to describe C1 areas citywide, and the time and expense it would take rezone all of those on city applications versus having some provision in there that whenever the property owner applies for some rezoning or the like permit, that the property owner would have to do it.
Or we could do an area at a time. You know, whatever. Okay, questions from the commission? And offer the staff some direction. Anybody?
Kevin Haley?
Commissioner Haley.
Thank you, Mayor, for the moment. First, I'd really like to thank Heath and the planning staff. It was a great memo, great report. It was actually a good read, very thorough. I love the analysis and the historical perspective. So thank you for putting this all together. I think it tells us that the time has come. We need to do something about the UDO. I'm very interested in the ongoing discussion and how we move forward with that, but we have many, many problems, and I think it can be fixed up. I didn't hear anything that you said that I disagree with. It was a pretty good analysis of the mess we're in, and I'd like to see it cleaned up. It will take some effort and commitment. I guess one question I would have is might there be a draft or model ordinances available, like from the American Planning Association or something, that we might be able to use as a template to delve into this, something that's already been proven and might be a lot faster and easier to go with? Other than that, again, I'd like to just listen to the discussion. We need to do something about it, and I think you're pointing us in the right direction. We need to make a decision about how to move forward.
Keith, let
Thank
me
you.
jump in and have the city attorney answer that question, because he and I talked about that about 2 hours ago.
1968 City of Franklin zoning code. Nice green and cream colored cover on it.
Simple, easy. You know, you go back to the future. But anyway.
Just
And Heath, I think you've got some other things relative to that.
Yeah, as I mentioned, low impact development is a good idea, particularly since Franklin has so much area that's wetlands. If I showed you the surface map from the DNR that shows our wetland areas and then the wetland indicator soils, there's not a whole lot left that hasn't already been built on. So the degree to which you can combine what you do on the ground development wise with what's already on the ground from a resource perspective can lead to a much more coherent design and probably a much better design. There's other models as well. There's other things we can try. There's a model ordinance for conservation design, which does account for these kinds of things. It's not quite as robust necessarily as low impact, but it is pretty robust and you can do those kinds of things. There's a little bit more uniformity to those things. That's the main problem with open space design right now, is because it varies depending on the district, depending on what you allow. And it's a lot cleaner if you have sort of a base thing there. You say, okay, you have X amount of open space, and then we design around that. So it'd be better to do that. There's a lot of other models out there. We can take some suggestions from some of the other communities around us in terms of how we do this as well. But there's ways to do it. But at base, I think we need to acknowledge that this is going to need to be pretty well re-engineered or rethought in order to get us to a place where we would actually prefer to be.
Alderman Dandria.
Heath, do we have anything budgeted for this in this fiscal year?
Yes.
How much?
What was it? It's either 150 or 200.
I thought it was 200,000.
Yeah, I think it's 200.
Were we planning on this being multiple years? How long do you think that this project is going to take?
I think you're probably looking at maybe 18 months, 2 years.
Okay, so it would go over 2 budgets.
Yeah.
Because, Mr. Mayor, here's a question for you: is how much did the plan cost in 1998?
I have no idea.
Not much?
I don't think so.
Heath, are you capable of being able to handle this internally, or are we going to have to go to using contracted services to put this together?
Well, it sort of depends on who you want doing it. Because if I end up writing it, I'll have to have help from staff internally, which means that we're probably going to either have to have somebody doing our other work for us, or we hire somebody else out to at least assist with rewriting this. And then it depends on the flavor of which we want to do this. We want to hire somebody to help design us a new box to sit in versus staff writing the box. I will say that my intention wasn't that somebody goes in somewhere, hides in an office for a few months, then comes back to you with a complete ordinance. The intention was that they come through, they do a diagnostic of the ordinance comprehensively. I've done mine is sort of a makeshift version. Tell you all the ways that we can fix it, come up with a model, get your sign off, and then they come back to you with pieces of it at a time. so that you can look those pieces over and get an idea as to those things. And they'd be topical areas like a section on uses and districts, a section on procedures and how to evaluate things and when you would trigger things, as the mayor said, about site plan amendments or special use amendments and those kinds of things, and work through those things so we can put those down as the revised document. Like I said, we could do it in-house, but we'd need help with the day-to-day stuff to make that happen. If we didn't have so much day-to-day stuff, we could probably do it in-house, but it's a Herculean effort to try and rewrite this thing.
Well, I don't think bringing an outside consultant in is going to be the answer, because we know it better internally than we do bringing an outside consultant that has to learn it from the beginning. I mean, this is going to be a mega project then, and it's going to cost a heck of a lot of money. I think that's where the problem came in when Mr. Dietl was trying to present it to the council back in 14 and 15. We just didn't want to endure the cost or the time. But we know that actually when we were hiring you, we knew that this was one of the hot buttons that the commission that was on the interviewing team had a concern on, is finding an individual that may be able to help us reevaluate this UDO and get this thing moving in the right direction in regards to repair or fix.
Okay.
Those are just my comments. The longer we wait, the more expensive it's going to get. That's the old adage.
Yeah.
And is it time to fix this before we develop everything under the old UDO, and then we don't have to worry about doing it because we won't have any land to have to worry about. So,
Commissioner Leon. Well, I'm going to respond to my colleague. The problem that we have with us doing it internally is there's a couple of issues there. One is getting our normal work done. Second is it doesn't really apply to us, but is your staff set in their ways enough that they can't look outside the box for a better solution? I don't think that's the case here, but that's an issue. I think there's a hybrid. I understand what you're saying. I think there's a hybrid where we could have this a consultant do the physical work with the consultation of staff, pointing them in the right direction. That being a weekly project meeting, something like that. But what I don't want to do is in line with what you want, is say, Mr. Consultant, bring us back an ordinance. That just doesn't work. But given your three options, Heath, as you know, my initial reaction is option 3.
Yeah.
Get rid of it and let's start over again. But you indicated that that's not particularly a good idea for many reasons. So for me, I'd suggest a full rewrite. I think I've done enough document editing in my days to know it's easier to write it yourself than to edit somebody else's. This thing, it's just such a mess that blank pages in the middle is pretty good for me. Commissioner Burkhart?
Yeah, the thought that comes to my mind is one of capacity, because we've had enough applicants in front of us who've waited certain amounts of time to get their items reviewed. I know that staff works hard, but they do have a limited amount of capacity. I'm inclined to agree that there is some tribal knowledge that exists probably within the staff's knowledge base of what's existing in the UDO, but I do like the suggestion of having a contractor or a third party write this with the assistance and guidance of staff. I think that keeps it clean for them to continue to do the job that they do on a day-to-day basis, and it also gets us in the direction we need. That being said, I think I'm in full agreement that a full rewrite is probably necessary. I don't think you can pick the jewels out of the rubble in this sense. And as was alluded to, it's got to be done probably in bits and pieces. It's, how do you eat an elephant one bite at a time kind of thing. So I think that's best organized and done by an outside party with the guidance of staff to keep everything comprehensive.
the other side benefit to this conversation, if we choose to move forward, which I say we got to, is it does, Mark, as far as we're concerned, it sends a big message to the development community that we know what our problems are, and we're moving to fix them. And that'll be another shot in the arm for our development. Now, having said that, when, in 1998, when this was adopted, this conditional use, I think we ought to change it to conditional use so we match the rest of the world, but our special use, permitted and special use designations were put in there by discussion with the aldermen in a time where the aldermen, and people can argue with me, but this is my opinion, were skeptical of every development. So they wanted to have their fingers in everything. That's why special use, permitted use. Whether we need that many or not, I don't, that remains to be discussed and decided. But, so I see a consensus for suggestion number 2, a full rewrite, right?
3.
No,
No, I'm sorry.
full rewrite. Heath, comments on that?
Okay. We will get started. We will get the RFP drafted and ready to go so we can see what we can do about getting some help.
Now, before this,
For the council.
I was just going to say that, before the RFP goes out, we need to have the council take a look at it and bless it. And it wouldn't hurt probably to have a committee of the whole next month just to do this presentation again for them. What do you think, Mark?
Probably. That's probably a good idea.
So let's plan on that, do a committee of the whole in March
Okay.
with this presentation, just so they keep in the loop.
All right.
Good. Is
We'll have it ready for you.
there a motion to adjourn?
Second.
All those in favor?
Hi.
Any opposed? Motion carries. Thanks, Kevin. Go plow your driveway.
I will. Good night.
Thanks.
Good night.
Thank you.
We're adjourned.
Good night.
No. Mayor did.